There I was, February 15th, the end of a long day of working on Riot. I had added some new enemies to the game, as well as a new set of parts, and the thought occurred to me. The game is super hilariously hard right now. I bet it would be fun to send a build to some members of the community and laugh at them trying to survive. Little did I know, this would be the most helpful accident of my game's entire development cycle. Hey there, I'm Sage and I'm developing Riot, a Mech-Action roguelike inspired by Armored Core and Risk of Rain. On February 15th, I accidentally started playtesting my game within the community's Discord server. That first night, I sent the build to a few of the more active community members, and I got to have a fun time watching them struggle against some of the new, super hard enemies that would jump scare them in the first level. I went to bed feeling fulfilled. There's no feeling quite like watching people play and have fun with your game. The next morning, when I woke up, I found numerous messages waiting for me in Discord. There were a few more people who wanted to try the build, and even some community members hanging out in voice and streaming the game together. First impression, they thought the game felt awesome to play, but they had some concerns around performance. They had even taken some time to track down possible causes of performance issues. Turns out you really shouldn't use an 8K texture for the dust particles that are constantly kicked up under the player's feet. Oops. As I sat in voice chat, hanging out with my community, hearing them bring up bugs they found and gushing about the movement, I realized, this is crazy helpful. Most devs would kill to have this kind of playtesting. That day, I made the decision to share a link to a build of the game, hosted on my personal Google Drive in a zip file, for folks in my Discord community to try. The server came alive in a whole new way, and I was inundated with bug reports, feedback on quality of life issues, mentions of key performance issues, and excitement about the game. People were loving it and playing it for hours and hours, even with all the prominent issues and jank. Here's a brief list of improvements I made to the playtest based on community feedback. Tons of performance improvements. Tons of bug fixes. Added a beacon to highlight the location of the transporter after 5 minutes. Added secret flare duels where you can fight enemy rigs for their parts. Okay, that one wasn't based on community feedback, but I thought the community would enjoy it. Multi-shops now pause the game while you make your choice. Discarded weapons are now dropped into the overworld instead of destroyed permanently. I totally reworked the turbo boost mechanic. I'm now in the process of another iteration on that. Stay tuned. I improved the behavior of enemy rigs, improved enemy spawning so they wouldn't show up directly behind the player, added an aim sensitivity setting, added another part set to round out the available drops for the playtest, bringing us to a total of 6, added sliders to change the behavior of your target selection with your reticle, added the ability to spin your mech around in the garage, added loadouts, and a whole lot more. At some point, I began to run into some problems. Google was preventing people from downloading the newest playtest version. Turns out there's a limit of 1 terabyte per day for downloads. Who knew? At that point, I decided that I needed to figure out a new solution. Initially, I was going to try to get the Steam playtest started, but I knew the review process would take a few days. Enter itch. Turns out it's pretty easy to upload new builds of a game to itch.io, so on March 23rd I created the itch page for Riot. You can actually download the playtest from there now if you'd like to. Make sure to let me know what you think. It's free, though you will get a prompt to donate in case that's something you'd like to do. Actually, while we're on the subject, I thought I should let you all know, I've actually created a Patreon. I would love it if you'd help support me as I work to make Riot into the awesome game I know it can be. And if you're excited about the game but not in a place to support it financially, I just want you to know that trying the playtest, giving me feedback, and spreading the word are all fantastic free ways to support the game. Okay, back to the playtest. So, at this point, there are a few things to highlight about the state of the game. First, the current iteration of Turbo Boost is too strong. Let me start by giving you some context on how the feature has evolved so far. For a long time, the game didn't have any sort of Turbo Boost feature. For the Armored Core fans, it's the Overed Boost, Assault Boost, etc. Basically a super fast boost that you may not use as often in combat, but that is super helpful for traversing the world in a way that makes you feel like a rad mech pilot. While playing the game myself to test various features, I found myself getting annoyed at how long it took to travel between the various points of interest, and a friend of mine who playtested the game a few times mentioned it as well. So, to ameliorate the issue, I added this. If you played Armored Core 6, you'll understand that this is basically Assault Boost at home. It served its purpose. It let the player travel quickly between different locations, and it also served as a way to ascend quickly. However, it was definitely added as a bit of an afterthought, and the community felt that. Most of the feedback about the game's movement has been people in awe of how polished and responsive it feels, something I take great pride in. However, a couple of times it came up that the turbo boost felt a lot worse than the rest of the game's movement, so I knew I had to try something else. After playing around with some options, I came up with something I liked. My solution was this. Turn turbo boost into a toggleable mode that quickly drains your energy, but also lets you move super fast. This lets it retain the strengths of the rest of my movement system while also letting it provide something unique. I also strongly reduced the effect of gravity while in turbo, which resulted in a pretty hilarious turbo jump maneuver where you could just ascend indefinitely. In the end though, I made it too good. Folks found themselves getting into a situation where they would just create super efficient builds to stay in turbo boost all the time and easily strafe around enemy attacks. The problem I originally added bullet hell style combat to solve. While the new turbo felt good to use, it quickly caused the game to become boring and samey. That's a big problem when I'm trying to create something that people can spend hundreds of hours with. So far, my solution is as follows. I've drastically increased the speed afforded by the turbo boost, and I've also drastically increased how much it costs to use. This should help offset its utility during combat. I've also taken away the extra reduced gravity. You can still use your flight boosters for free during a turbo, so you can maintain your height, but you won't be rocketing off to the moon. Speaking of, due to removing the turbo jump option, I've worked in some additional mechanics. First, I've given every mech access to the vertical dash. This move is now executed by pressing the dash button while holding the jump button and no additional directional input. This serves as a powerful tool for vertical mobility that will feel quite different depending on your build. On top of that, I've also added a wall jump mechanic. This isn't quite as in-depth as the one in AC5, but it should serve as an interesting additional tool in your movement arsenal. Also good for if a certain ledge is just out of reach. With this change, I've also given the jump pack a much more powerful and efficient vertical dash, which should prove more engaging to use than the old turbo. That brings me to the other major problem I began to hear about. After a while, playtesters were beginning to feel like the stages needed more variety, as well as more ability for enemies to keep up with the player's power scaling. Now, this is a pretty multifaceted problem. Difficulty and power-ups will need to be tuned over time, a lot of enemies still have to be added, etc. All of that will come with time. However, one of the more active community members had an idea of a method to make enemy encounters a bit more engaging in general. So far, I've struggled with the concept of verticality in level design. Designing awesome vertical spaces is great, but if the enemies you're fighting can't access those spaces, there's really no point. I always took that to mean that I had to figure out some way for enemies to access the player through their pathfinding. However, I was presented with a new paradigm. Hotspots. Initially, the concept of hotspots was basically preset areas or encounters where I could set enemies up in a manner that better facilitated player engagement with the environment, as well as a way to incentivize players to target more challenging enemies and earn the currency needed for the best in-mission rewards. The concept gradually evolved and has since become the path I took toward procedurally generated level layouts. At this point, the plan is as follows. Each stage will have a large portion of its layout determined by a randomized combination of an assortment of hotspots. Hotspots are basically micro-levels, where I can preset enemy spawn points, interactable spawn points, and even some secrets. The plan is to incentivize players to seek out these hotspots, as they'll have better loot to some degree, and they will also provide an additional challenge and a more defined primary source of currency. This should give the player an objective, as well as more risks and rewards to weigh. Now, these things are all fairly early. In fact, as I write this, they've only just been added to the current iteration of the playtest. Additionally, if it's possible for you to stream or record your gameplay, that is also very helpful for me, as there are always things for me to learn from watching people play the game. I always find new things to fix or improve, and frankly, it also makes me feel all warm and fuzzy. Anyway, that's about where things are at, but I wanted to shout out a couple things quick. First, I'd really appreciate it if you'd subscribe to this channel and wishlist the game on Steam. Wishlists are a major way to tell both me and Steam that people are seriously excited about this game, so every wishlist counts. If you want to get connected with the game's community, we have a Discord that you're welcome to join. It's been super fun to watch a community grow around this game, and I'd love for you to be a part of it. If you're not sick of me yet, I actually appeared over on the Pixel Breakdown YouTube channel. So if you'd like to hear some very extended and meta thoughts of mine about mech games and game development in general, you'll love that. Also, one last plug for the Patreon. All the things will be linked in the description. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.